What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Daddy Jeep Garage. This week, it's all about axles. We're working on little axles. We're working on big axles. We got axles for everything. Keith's axle for his TJ, his high pinion Dana 30, which is actually out of an XJ. We're getting this thing finished up and ready to go under his Jeep. And then I'm getting after my Dana 60 for my YJ because it needs a suspension upgrade. Bantam is coming up in right about a month. So we have two Jeeps back there that don't have axles. So it's some pretty big projects, but that's the way I like it. I like to be under pressure. That forces things to get done. Weird. I don't get it. I'm sure glad the camera's rolling. It comes out way better when you take the nut off. It's weird. I don't understand. All right, so now we've pulled apart the original bearings and we got the shim dimensions. We're going to use those numbers as our starting point to set up the new gears.
All right, I'm painting my gears.
All right, that's beautiful.
Beautiful. Look at that.
All right, so we've got our gear in here. Everything's temporary. We don't even have the guts in this thing yet, but we're going to go ahead and run a quick pattern just to make sure we're on the right track. We've done this before, but keep a little bit of tension on the ring gear as you roll it around just to make sure the teeth can make good marks. What we see here is we are high on the tooth. We're pretty centered, and the centered tells you your backlash is good. The depth on the tooth is your pinion depth. And of course, this motive gear set did not come with pinion shims. So we've got to figure out what we're doing to bring that pinion in quite a bit, 10 thousandths maybe. All right, so we got it all put back together. It's super tight, which is okay. We want it a little bit tight. When you shove it in, some people use a case spreader. We just made it super tight, so hopefully Keith doesn't break this thing again, so we have to pull it back out because that sucker's in there. I mean, for now, we're going to get it together. It'll be fine for the trail. You're not going down the road, but we might need to, I mean, we're under a time crunch now, but once we get it together, we'll check the pinion angle. Not the pinion. We'll check the pinion angle, yes, but we'll also check the caster angle.
Yeah. That's not quite long enough for that upper.
So, yeah, I think your caster's way off.
Yeah.
It should be leaning back.
Right.
It's currently leaning forward.
Yes.
All right, we got this side as good as we can get it. Our caster is definitely not right, but we're going to call it good because we don't have any more travel. So it just might drive a little sketchy going. So I'm getting this truss put together so I can get it mocked up on the axle, and this thing is foolproof. Barnes did a really nice job designing this. Every tab, so this piece can only go here. The size of this tab is different than this piece, so you can't really assemble it wrong. Everything drops into place really nice and can only go in one place. All right, that'll do it. I did all the tacks in places. It was really convenient to cut back off. I can't imagine the need to cut any of the tacks back off, but just in case, I did it where I could. So that should be everything I need in order to be able to take this over and test fit it on my axle. Okay, so now that it's on here, it answers some questions. I thought I was going to have to cut away some of this housing, and I most definitely do. It's designed to cut, about 2 inches of this housing off. So certainly going to have to do that, and also, of course, this leaf spring mount's going to have to go too. But at least it's kind of sitting there and giving me an idea of what the next steps are. All right, we're getting this Dana 60 torn down. I need to get this knuckle completely off. I'm going to strip the ball joints out. We're going to put new ball joints in. We need to get some grinding done, get this vacuum nipple cut off so we can weld on the Jesse Haines high steer arms. So these have to get completely taken off the axle. And of course my pretty green paint's got to get all ground off. And then we got a bunch of work to do on the axle itself. We got to get these spring perches off. We got to cut some of the housing off so we can get this Barnes truss welded on. Yeah. see. Alright, that's all it takes to get that knuckle off. Time to start chopping off these leaf spring mounts and my old ram mount, because we're going to build some new stuff there. Nice. All right, so we aligned the truss and we've realized we need to cut about 2 inches off of this. I went ahead and made some marks, and I've been just working my way around it with a cutoff wheel, trying not to cut into the tube, which isn't a huge deal if I do, because I will be welding the tube to the casting. So if I get into it a little bit, it's not the end of the world, but I'm trying not to. So we're just about through. I got a little bit of cutting to do, and then we're going to go after this thing with the air hammer and see if we can break these chunks off. I did that a whole lot easier than I ever imagined it was going to be. And it just fell right off. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better. So, you know, a lot of guys are going to say that these 99 to 04 axles aren't as good as 05 and up, and there's a lot of reasons they're not as good. But tearing them down and prepping for custom suspension, these win all day long. Everything's cleaned up. We ground off the original welds from the leaf spring perch. We ground the tubes nice and smooth and shiny. We ground knocked some edges off over here. And we went ahead and we test fit the truss. Everything fits as it should. I don't see anywhere where I really need to do any grinding at this point. So what I'm going to do to minimize putting heat into the axle itself, I'm going to go ahead and fully weld out this truss off of the axle. Because even though this thing's a monster, heavy tubes and all that stuff, we can still bend it by welding in properly and applying too much heat. So to minimize that, we're going to get this truss welded independent of the axle. Once this is welded and cooled, then we'll get on the axle and we'll start welding it to the axle. All right, I've got my pinion set at about 8 degrees. That's typical of most trusses, and with this one, it ends up, these flats are like perfectly parallel with what's left of the original spring plate, and the hole for the breather is perfectly centered. So I'm sure everything is exactly where it should be. So we're gonna go ahead and get this thing welded to the axle. Now I've got it strapped down as tight as I can, hold everything in place, just so I can get it all tacked. And we're going to go super slow. I don't want to warp this thing. We're going to jump around, do little 1-inch long welds, jumping all over the place, letting them cool in between. So we're going to take our time, get this thing burned in. All right, we did a fair amount of welding. We're going to go ahead and let this cool. We're going to go get ourselves a nice cold beer, come back to this in 20 minutes or so, and weld some more. We're back. It's time to figure out these knuckles. I have knocked my ball joints out, so I got that out of the way. Now I've got all these bits and pieces from Jesse Haines Fab that are going to make me some high steer arms. I just don't know how to put it together yet. Short spacer. Next plate. Long spacer, and then it's going to go through that hole, which currently needs drilled out. But that's telling me where things are going to go, so at least that's a starting point. This whole area where this vacuum fitting goes needs to go away, and this whole weird little bung sticking out here needs to go away, and I need to drill this hole out to 3/4. So that's where we're going to start, get that part at least done, and then we'll do another fitting and see where we're at. All right, that wasn't too bad. Cast grinds very nice, so it didn't take too long to get that all ground down. So let's see if we're getting a little closer to everything fitting where it should now. So fitment's pretty good. Next step is I have to drill this hole out to a 3/4. So if you haven't drilled a tapered hole out to 3/4 before, hang on to your hat because it's not a lot of fun. So the key to big bits is spin this drill as slow as you can possibly spin it. All right. Gives me a little better angle. Now you can't see my head anymore, but that's okay. Nothing exciting there anyway. All right, so that was that. I made a really nice pile of chips. We got it through there, and I didn't even break myself, but it was close that one time. So now we can put everything back together and start welding. All right, before we weld this thing, we got to get this up to 600 degrees, which means I probably should have grabbed the heat gun before I got the fire going. Keith, can you hand me that heat gun, please? Thank you. Let's put this where we're not going to cook it. All right, and then we bake 600 degrees. We got that pretty darn close to 600, as close as I'm going to get it. Steel's turning blue. I'm tired of cooking, so we're going to start welding. Down the road, Keith. What else is new, huh? So we got this thing up over 600 degrees. So now it's time to do some welding. All right, now that this thing is fully welded, we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up so it can cool nice and slow and hopefully prevent cracking. All right, that'll do. Okay, we got a solid green light. All right, according to the specs, we got to torque this lower ball joint to 35 foot-pounds. I guess that's it. Lower to 35, upper to 70.